Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab, and welcome to this deep dive. We've gathered a whole lot of fascinating insights today, and we're going to unpack the really key takeaways for you.
That's right.
And today, we're exploring something that feels, well, more important than ever: nature's powerful effect on our mental well-being.
It really does feel crucial right now.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the global picture, the stats on mental health are pretty concerning.
Yeah.
We're seeing photos showing depression and anxiety rates climbing quite steeply. Some analyses suggest, a 25% jump worldwide just since the pandemic started. That's impacting over 1 billion people.
Wow, over 1 billion. That's just staggering. And then you contrast that with how we live now, right?
Right.
Data suggests city dwellers spend like 90% of their time indoors.
90%. It's a huge disconnect from, the natural world we evolved alongside for millennia. And the material we've looked through makes a really strong case here. Nature isn't just, a nice view. It actually seems to be a vital tool, maybe even an antidote to some of these modern pressures we're all feeling.
An antidote. I like that.
Yeah, whether it's a big park, a forest, or even just like a small patch of green. Engaging our senses out there seems to really calm the mind, helps us reset.
Okay, let's dive in then. We're going to explore the science, how this actually works, and the psychological effects, the shifts it creates in us.
Mm-hmm. We'll also touch on, the cultural side of things, look at some real-world examples of interventions.
And importantly, also look at the challenges, right? Like accessing nature and making sure we preserve it.
Definitely. So where to start? Maybe with the fundamental science. There's this concept called biophilia.
Biophilia, that sounds like a love of life or nature.
That's pretty close. It's basically the idea that humans have this innate, deep-seated connection and affinity for the natural world. The thinking is it's kind of hardwired into us from our evolutionary past. It explains why we're often drawn to green spaces, water, that kind of thing.
So it's not just, that's pretty. It's more like a fundamental need.
That's the argument, yeah. And there's research that backs this up. One study found something quite striking.
Mm-hmm.
Just 20 minutes of contact with nature.
Just 20 minutes.
Yeah, just sitting or walking. It significantly reduced levels of cortisol.
Cortisol. That's the main stress hormone, isn't it?
It is. And they even called these short bursts nature pills. They noted other benefits too, like improved mood and better focus, beyond just the stress reduction.
Mm-hmm.
It really shows that even brief contact can make a measurable difference.
20 minutes. That feels, pretty achievable for a lot of people, even on a busy day.
It does. And another piece of research used brain imaging.
Yeah.
It found that simply looking at pictures of natural scenes.
Just looking.
Yeah, just looking. It activated the brain's reward centers. The areas linked to dopamine release, that feeling of pleasure. But when people looked at urban scenes, it often triggered more activity in the amygdala.
The fear and stress center.
Exactly. So our brains really seem preset to respond positively to nature.
So it's a preference, but with a real neurochemical basis. How does this play out in real life settings?
Well, the material highlighted a really great example, the Urban Biophilia Project in Chicago.
Okay.
It's an initiative that works to connect communities, especially low-income ones, with their local green spaces. We learned about Maria, who was dealing with a lot of chronic stress.
Mm-hmm.
She started joining these guided walks in Garfield Park, and she reported, get this, a 30% drop in her anxiety levels.
30%? That's huge, just from park walks.
Yeah, she described it as feeling like coming home, a real sense of relief.
That's powerful. Okay, so building on that science, what about how nature affects our thinking, our cognition?
Right, that brings us to something called attention restoration theory, or RT.
RT.
The basic idea is that modern life, especially city life, demands constant directed attention.
Mm-hmm.
Focusing hard, filtering out noise, making decisions all the time. It's mentally draining.
Totally. I feel that after a long day on the computer or trying to work in a busy cafe, that mental fatigue.
Exactly that. So RT proposes that nature offers a different kind of attention. Soft fascination.
Soft fascination.
Think about watching clouds drift or leaves rustling or water flowing. It holds your attention, but effortlessly. It doesn't require that intense focus.
I see.
And this allows those directed attention circuits in your brain to rest and recover.
So nature kind of hits the cognitive reset button.
That's a great way to put it. And there's evidence. One study actually compared brain activity after people walked in nature versus an urban setting. The nature walkers showed reduced activity in a specific brain area linked to rumination to worry. Getting stuck in those negative thought loops.
Oh, wow. That's significant for anyone who tends to overthink or worry.
It really is. The urban walkers didn't show that same reduction. It suggests nature helps break those repetitive negative thoughts.
Fascinating.
And this applies in workplaces too. Research found office workers who had a view of green space reported higher job satisfaction, about 15% higher, and less stress.
Just having a view makes that much difference.
Apparently so. And there was this example of a tech firm in Seattle that actually encourages green breaks.
Corporate nature breaks, that sounds forward-thinking.
It seems to work. There was David, an engineer there. He started taking short, 15-minute walks in a nearby nature reserve during his day.
Yeah.
He noticed his focus improved, felt less burned out. And interestingly, his team's overall productivity actually went up by about 10% after they started doing this more regularly.
A 10% productivity boost, that's a clear win-win for everyone.
Yeah, family.
So we've got stress hormones going down, our attention getting restored. What about other physical responses? Are there more tangible physiological changes happening?
Oh, absolutely. This is where practices like Shinrin-yoku come in. You might have heard of it as forest bathing. It originated in Japan.
Forest bathing. Yeah, I've heard that term. It sounds very calming. What does the science say is actually happening in the body?
Well, studies have found some pretty significant changes. Just 1 hour of forest bathing has been shown to lower blood pressure by around 6% and heart rate by about 4%.
Wow.
And get this, the material also mentioned compounds released by trees, these things called phytoncides.
Phytoncides.
Yeah. Breathing them in might actually boost our immune system, specifically by increasing the activity of our natural killer cells, which help fight off infections and even tumors.
So the trees themselves are kind of giving us a health boost. That's incredible.
It appears that way. And looking broadly, a big meta-analysis combining results from hundreds of studies confirmed it. Nature exposure consistently lowers various stress markers: cortisol, adrenaline, heart rate variability. It all points towards physical relaxation.
And that physical relaxation must link to feeling mentally calmer too.
Absolutely. They're deeply connected. Mental clarity, calm.
Yeah.
It often follows that physical unwinding.
Was there a specific story about forest bathing in the material?
Yes. There was Hiroshi, an accountant in Tokyo. He was under immense work stress, and his doctor actually prescribed forest bathing sessions.
A doctor prescribed it. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And after 3 months of regular sessions, his blood pressure dropped significantly, and he reported a 25% decrease in his anxiety levels. He said the whole sensory experience of the forest just helped him completely reset mentally.
That's a brilliant example. Does this connection go even deeper? Like, can nature actually change our brains over time, structurally?
Well, that's an exciting area of research, looking at neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and form new connections.
Right.
Some findings suggest that regular time in nature might increase levels of BDNF,
BDNF.
brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's a protein that's really important for learning, memory, and mood regulation. Higher BDNF levels are often linked to reduced symptoms of depression and anxiety.
So spending time in nature could potentially help our brains grow and heal, which might lessen mental health issues over time.
That's the hypothesis, yes. And there was an example that really brought this to life. The nature retreat in Australia, in the Blue Mountains, specifically for trauma recovery.
Okay.
Lisa, a woman recovering from domestic violence, went on this 2-week retreat. It was focused on nature immersion, mindfulness, and afterwards, her BDNF levels went up by 20%.
20%.
And her PTSD symptoms reduced by 35%. It's a really powerful illustration of how nature can support resilience and healing on a deep level.
Okay, the science is definitely compelling. Let's shift a bit more into the psychological effects. How does all this translate into how we actually feel day to day?
Well, it fundamentally comes back to that shift, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Moving the body out of that high alert fight or flight state and into the calmer rest and digest mode. Natural settings seem to really help facilitate that shift.
Yeah.
Research consistently shows that having green space nearby can cut stress levels, maybe 10-15%, especially for city dwellers.
That makes intuitive sense.
Yeah.
Just leaving the concrete jungle behind often feels like you can finally breathe properly.
It does. And this stress relief seems to lead to better emotional regulation too. One study found that people spending just 2 hours a week in nature reported feeling more emotionally stable, fewer big mood swings.
2 hours a week? That's not a huge amount.
No, it's quite achievable. And part of it might be the sensory richness of nature. The sounds, the smells, the textures. It naturally pulls you into the present moment.
Right. It helps with mindfulness.
Exactly. It cuts through that constant mental chatter, the rumination.
It helps quiet the internal noise.
That's a good way to put it. Sarah's story was a great example of this. She's a marketing exec in New York City, was struggling with chronic anxiety. She started taking just 20-minute walks in Central Park every day. And she saw a huge drop, 40% in her anxiety symptoms.
40% from daily park walks.
Yeah. And now she intentionally uses that time for mindfulness, really focusing on the trees, the birds, the feel of the air.
So it's not just being in nature, but being present while you're there. What about lifting mood more generally, maybe combating feelings of depression?
Yeah, there's a strong link there too. Nature exposure seems to boost mood, partly by influencing neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine.
The feel-good chemicals.
Right. And a large study found that living within, say, a kilometer of green space was associated with a 20% lower likelihood of experiencing depression. Plus, just being outside often means more sunlight exposure.
Which helps with vitamin D and serotonin too.
Exactly. And there's another interesting angle, the concept of awe.
Awe, like seeing something amazing.
Precisely. Experiencing awe in nature, watching a stunning sunset, standing by the ocean, looking up at giant trees, has been found to reduce symptoms of depression by around 15%.
How does awe do that?
It seems to shift your focus away from yourself, away from those inward-looking, often negative thoughts. It gives you a sense of perspective, connects you to something bigger than your own problems.
That broader perspective. Yeah, I can see that. Michael's story really seemed to capture that.
It really did. He's a veteran who is dealing with PTSD and depression. He went on a wilderness therapy program out in the Rocky Mountains.
Right.
And he talked about moments like watching a meteor shower, just the vastness of it all. It gave him that sense of awe, and with it, a feeling of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. His depression scores dropped by 30% over the program. He really felt awe was key to his healing.
That's incredible. Does nature also sharpen our thinking, like creativity or focus?
Yes, the research points that way too. Improvements in cognitive function. Studies with kids show that just an hour a week in green spaces boosted working memory and attention spans by about 10%.
Wow, for kids especially, that's significant.
And for adults, nature seems to enhance divergent thinking.
Divergent thinking, that's like creativity, coming up with new ideas.
Exactly. Brainstorming outside, for example, seems to lead to more original ideas compared to doing it indoors.
That's really useful for anyone in a creative field or anyone who just feels stuck.
Definitely. Emma's story illustrated this well. She's a graphic designer in London, hit a major creative block. So she started going to Regent's Park just to sketch. Being in that natural environment sparked new ideas, helped her break through the block. Her resulting project got praised for its originality, and now she makes a habit of working outdoors sometimes.
That's a great practical tip. And you mentioned earlier that practicing mindfulness is even more effective in nature.
Yes. The material suggested that doing mindfulness exercises in a natural setting can lead to about 20% greater stress reduction compared to doing the same practices indoors or in an urban environment.
Why is that?
It seems the natural world provides these gentle, inherent anchors for your attention. The sound of wind, the feeling of sun, the smell of damp earth. It makes it easier to stay present and deepen the practice, perhaps.
Like Aisha's experience, the teacher in Mumbai.
Exactly. She was dealing with burnout, joined a meditation group that met in a botanical garden. She found meditating amongst the plants made it much easier to focus, quiet her mind. Her burnout scores dropped by 25%. The setting really amplified the benefits for her.
So the science is strong, the psychological benefits are clear. Let's zoom out a bit. What about the broader cultural and social dimensions?
Yeah, that's important too. Nature plays a huge role in healing traditions across many cultures worldwide. Think about indigenous communities, where the land is often seen as integral to health and well-being, woven into ceremonies and traditional medicine, or traditions like Japanese Shinto, which has this deep reverence for natural elements, fostering a sense of calm and connection through nature.
And there was that example from Australia, Aboriginal bush medicine.
Yes. Tarani, an Aboriginal woman, shared her experience at a healing camp. She talked about how connecting with traditional plants and spending time by a river helped her process grief after losing a family member. For her, the river symbolized washing away sorrow, a really powerful, culturally embedded connection between land and healing.
Nature as a space for cultural continuity and collective healing.
And it fosters community more generally, too. Research suggests that doing group activities in nature, things like community gardening or group hikes, can increase people's feelings of belonging by about 15%.
That sense of connection is so important, especially now with concerns about loneliness.
Absolutely. It directly counters that isolation. Jane's story from the UK really highlighted this.
She was the teacher in Bristol.
That's right. Struggling with burnout, she joined a local community garden. Working the land alongside her neighbors gave her a new sense of purpose, strong social connections, and her depression symptoms decreased by 20%. The garden became this vital social hub for her. It shows how nature can support both individual and community well-being.
That leads to a really critical point, though. Access. Not everyone has easy access to these kinds of green spaces, especially in cities.
You're absolutely right. That discussion around urban green spaces and mental health equity is crucial. We know that having access to parks, say within 500 meters of your home, is linked to higher life satisfaction, less anxiety. Cities like Copenhagen, famous for their green corridors, really show any benefits when nature is integrated into the urban fabric.
But the reality is often quite different, isn't it?
It is. Studies, particularly in the US, show stark disparities. Neighborhoods with higher proportions of minority residents often have significantly less green space per person, sometimes 30% less or even more.
30% less. That's a huge difference.
It is, and it clearly exacerbates existing mental health inequalities. So initiatives like the Detroit Tree Equity Partnership, which focuses on planting trees in underserved neighborhoods, are incredibly important. They're trying to bridge that gap.
So it's not just about individuals choosing to go outside, it's about systemic issues. It's about urban planning and ensuring equitable access for everyone. Lars in Copenhagen, his experience showed what's possible.
Exactly. He mentioned biking through the city's green routes daily helps him manage stress, contributes to his overall well-being. It shows the systemic benefit when that access is built in and prioritized.
Okay, let's turn now to some specific examples of how nature is being used more formally in actual therapeutic interventions.
Right. The material covered several interesting approaches. One was wilderness therapy, often used with adolescents. Programs like Outward Bound or similar models have shown pretty good results, reductions in anxiety and depression symptoms, around 25% for teens taking part.
And Ethan's story from one of those programs sounded really impactful.
It really did. He was a teenager struggling with substance abuse, low self-esteem. He found the wilderness environment, away from usual pressures, incredibly supportive, non-judgmental. It helped him interrupt his substance use patterns and find what he called an anchor for his recovery, rooted in that natural setting.
An anchor. That's a powerful image. Are doctors actually prescribing nature now?
In some places, yes. Like in Scotland, the NHS has piloted a nature prescription program. GPs can literally prescribe activities like joining a walking group, doing beach cleanups, bird watching.
That's amazing. How effective is it?
An evaluation found that 70%, really high number of participants, reported improvements in their mental health.
70%. That's huge. Fiona's story fits here, right?
Yes, Fiona. She's a nurse who was dealing with anxiety, and she received a nature prescription for regular coastal walks. She described how walking by the sea, the sound of the waves, the vastness, it had a profound calming effect and significantly reduced her anxiety. She felt the ocean helped her heal.
Just incredible. We touched on corporate wellness before, too.
Yeah, companies are definitely catching on. Some big tech firms like Google have actually designed outdoor workspaces, meeting areas. Internal surveys suggest employees using these spaces report higher job satisfaction, about 12% higher, and lower stress levels, around 10% lower.
And Priya's experience at Google showed that direct link.
Right. Priya, an engineer, found using these outdoor areas for brainstorming was great for her focus, cut down her stress. Her team even noticed their project completion rates improved when they started having some meetings outside.
It just seems like such a simple, effective strategy. Finally, what about using nature for more chronic, long-term mental health conditions?
Yeah, there's growing interest in ecotherapy approaches. Things like horticultural therapy, basically. Therapeutic gardening.
Gardening as therapy.
Exactly. One study found that participating in gardening programs helped reduce symptoms for people with conditions like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder by about 20%.
20%? How does that work?
It seems to provide structure, a sense of purpose, gentle physical activity, mindfulness. Mark's journey was a good example. He has bipolar disorder, and joining a gardening program really helped him.
How so?
Tending the plants provided routine focus. It helped stabilize his moods. He reported a 25% decrease in mood swings. And now he's using those skills to help others in the program. It shows the potential for recovery, empowerment through connecting with nature.
This all sounds incredibly positive, but surely there are hurdles, challenges to using nature effectively as a widespread mental health tool.
Oh, definitely. And the material was quite clear about these obstacles. Access and equity, as we touched on, are huge.
Right, the disparities.
Yeah, the fact that low-income communities, and often communities of color, have significantly less access to safe, high-quality green space, sometimes 40% less in some areas. This just widens existing mental health gaps. Maria benefited from that new park in Chicago, but her story highlights that access often requires specific, targeted efforts. It's not just there for everyone.
So we can't just tell people go outside more if there's nowhere safe or pleasant for them to go. We need to actively create and maintain those spaces equitably.
Exactly right. Then there's environmental sustainability. As more people recognize the benefits and flock to natural areas, there's a real risk of over-tourism damaging those very ecosystems.
Like loving nature to death.
Sort of, yeah. We need to find ways to engage respectfully, sustainably, so these places remain healthy for wildlife and for future generations seeking solace there. We need to be stewards.
Good point. Stewards, not just consumers. What else?
Digital distractions are a big one in the modern world.
Ah, the smartphone in the forest.
Precisely. Being physically in nature but mentally glued to a screen can really diminish those restorative benefits we talked about. One study found people reported feeling 20% more relaxed after a device-free nature visit compared to one where they used their phones.
So we need to consciously disconnect to properly reconnect.
It seems so. Tom's experience at a device-free retreat really drove that home for him. Putting the phone away allowed him to fully immerse and get much more out of it.
Makes sense.
And finally, there's the really big overarching threat: climate change and nature loss itself. Deforestation, pollution, urban sprawl. We're losing natural spaces at an alarming rate globally.
Which directly threatens our future access to all these benefits we've been discussing.
Exactly. So advocating for conservation, for climate action, for protecting biodiversity, it's not separate from protecting human mental health. They're intrinsically linked.
That's a sobering but crucial point. So considering the science, the stories, and also these challenges, what practical takeaways did the material offer? How can people realistically integrate more nature into their daily lives?
Well, several actionable things came up. Taking short, frequent nature breaks, even just 10 or 20 minutes during the workday or lunch break, was shown to help reduce stress.
Okay, small bites?
Yeah. Engaging in gardening is another one, even if it's just a few pots on a balcony or joining a community garden like Jane did. That hands-on connection seems really beneficial.
And hobbies.
Right. Pursuing nature-based hobbies could be bird watching, nature photography, sketching outdoors like Emma, hiking. These deepen the connection and provide enjoyment.
What about people with very limited access, maybe mobility issues or living in a concrete jungle?
Even virtual nature experiences high-quality nature documentaries, soundscapes, virtual reality nature scenes. While not a full substitute, they can offer some partial benefits, some temporary stress relief.
That's good to know.
And advocating for change, pushing for more green spaces in communities, integrating nature into workplaces or schools. That creates opportunities for everyone.
And that point about mindfulness again.
Yes, consciously practicing mindfulness while in nature seems key. Really tuning into your senses, what you see, hear, smell, feel. That appears to amplify the positive effects compared to just passively being there.
So wrapping this all up, this deep dive really underscores a profound, scientifically backed connection between nature and our mental health.
It really does. It's clear that nature isn't just a nice to have. It's a versatile, often accessible, and powerful tool for improving well-being across the board, from cutting stress and boosting mood to sparking creativity and even building stronger communities.
And the stories we discussed, Sarah, in Central Park, Michael finding hope in the mountains, Jane connecting in her garden, Fiona healing by the sea, they aren't just anecdotes, are they? They vividly illustrate the research in action, showing the real human impact.
Absolutely. And yes, there are real challenges: access, sustainability, our digital habits, the larger environmental threats.
They're not insurmountable.
No, they require conscious choices, individual effort, and collective action, advocacy for change.
It feels like reconnecting with nature is becoming less of a lifestyle choice and more, well, almost an essential part of staying mentally healthy in this complex modern world.
I think that's right. It feels increasingly vital.
So that leaves us and you with a thought to mull over. Given everything we've explored, the proven benefits, the modern pressures, the environmental context, how can you personally make connecting with nature a bigger priority in your life? And perhaps what collective steps do we need to take to ensure that everyone, no matter where they live, can access the healing power of the natural world?
We really hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and food for thought.
Yes, we hope so too. If you found this discussion helpful and interesting, please do give us a like, share it with others who might benefit, and be sure to subscribe to the Learn English Lab YouTube channel for more deep dives like this one. Thanks for joining us.